Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us for this online information session for the University of British Columbia's Department of Political Science graduate program. We're delighted to have so many people here, and we're going to spend this session doing a couple of things. One is that we're going to give you an overview of the department, of programs and course offerings, and then we're going to open things up for questions so that you can ask us about things we didn't cover, things that are on your mind, things you want to know about what we have to offer. So let us start by, first of all, acknowledging that the land that this university is on, UBC's Point Grey campus, is the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. This has been a place of learning for a very, very long time, long before UBC was here, for the Musqueam people, a place where the Musqueam on their culture, history, and traditions over generations. And we're very grateful to be able to continue to learn here on this land. One of logistics. Please make sure that your mic is muted so that we don't have background noise from different participants during the presentation. At any time during the presentation or during the Q&A session, you can type your questions into the chat box. That's how you should submit questions, is through the chat box. And then we're going to answer those during the Q&A session. We're also going to be posting a recording of the session in case you missed part of it on our website. And we'll be sending out the slides, so you don't have to furiously take down notes as we're talking. You can look at the slides later. Here's the agenda. I won't spend time reading this out to you, but just to give you an idea of what we're going to be doing. And now let us introduce ourselves. So I am Alan Jacobs. I'm a professor in the department. I happen to work in the field of comparative politics, but my main role today is as the director of the graduate program. So I take the lead in facilitating, running both the MA and the PhD programs. And I'm happy to be joined today by my colleague, Katja Coleman.
Hi, so I'm Katja Coleman. I'm an associate professor in the department. My area of studies is international relations. So I study specifically international organizations, peacekeeping, the UN, NATO, and especially African regional organizations as well. And I'm also the field chair for our international relations program this year. And for me too, thank you very much for joining us and welcome. So we'll start off by giving you a sense of what the university and the department is like. So we're a globally known, highly ranked research university. So Times Higher Education ranking most recently put us at 34 in the world. We are a relatively large public university, so you've got the student numbers there. About 10,000 of those students are grad students. Amongst our student population, there's a large international community as well, and that would also include about 2,500 of our graduate students. And you have the number of faculty and staff there as well, just shy of 17,000, all coming together for the university itself. And then in the department itself, what we have is, sorry, the slides are stuck. Thanks. Sorry. So the department itself, we have about just shy of 100 students. That would be 54 PhD students and 44 MA students. About half of our students are international at this level. And there's 40 tenured and tenure track faculty members doing a fairly large assortment of different kinds of research. Some of the areas of strength to highlight in this context: there's climate change and the environment, post-colonial theory and practice, democratic theory and institutions, international norms, international organizations. Do a lot of work on migration and on ethnic politics. political economy and public policy, critical theory in the theory section. And in parallel to that, or in addition to this, we do a fair bit of, we do a lot of methods training, and that covers really a spectrum of methods, including qualitative methods, heuristics, and a range of formal methods. So we cover a lot of political science from varied angles. And we're also affiliated with a set of centers and institutions throughout the universities that help us expand and increase our strengths. So you have the list there: European Studies, the Liu Institute for Global Issues, Asian Research, Critical Indigenous Studies, Resources, Environment and Sustainability, Gender, Race, Sexuality and Social Justice, a US Studies program, a Center for Democratic Institutions, and the School of Public Policy and Global Affairs. That is the network that the department also functions in, and that our students can draw on for their expertise.
One thing just to add is that to get a broader sense of, the areas of strength that Katya mentioned are, as she said, a few highlights of things that we work on. There are many, many other areas that our faculty work in, and what you should do if you want to know more about what our faculty do is to go to our website and look through the faculty profiles, and you'll find all kinds of additional topics that people work on, from experimental methods to survey research to the study of elections and public opinion. We could go on and on, but the place to start with that really is our website. Okay, so let's have a look at what the MA and PhD programs look like, how they work, what you would be doing in either of those programs if you came here. So starting with the MA program, there are a couple of basic requirements. So it is a one-year program. That is how it is conceived, and about half of students finish within a year. Some take a little bit longer than a year, but the vast majority are done within a year and a half. I'm not on that slide yet. Okay. Back to. There we go. The requirements in the program are twofold. One is taking 6 courses, and generally you do that as 3 courses in the fall when you get here and 3 courses in the spring. So by the end of April, you're done with your coursework, and then you turn to the second key requirement, which is the MA thesis. And the thesis is conceived as sort of the scale of the thesis is such that it's something that you should be able to complete over the course of the summer, thereby defending by the end of August and having your MA a year after you arrived. We offer, so in terms of the courses that you could choose from, we offer courses right across the sort of standard fields of political science, and we also move a bit beyond those standard fields. So as you find in most departments, we have courses in political theory and comparative politics, international relations, Canadian politics. We also have a field of US politics because we've got a substantial concentration of faculty here who work on the United States. We also, one thing that I think really distinguishes us is that we have a considerable number of people in this department working on Indigenous politics. And there are courses inside but also outside the Department of Indigenous Politics that you can take. Moving on to the timeline, just to sort of show you this graphically, here you've got your fall term with 3 courses, typically also working as a teaching assistant. The spring term looks a lot like the fall term. You do your second set of 3 courses with TA work, and then over the summer you've got the thesis and the thesis defense. So what does our funding look like for MA students? The core of the funding that we offer is offered via teaching assistantships, graduate teaching assistantships. And the standard setup is that you're doing 12 hours a week of TA work. That's on average over the fall term and again over the spring term. And in each term, that pays about $6,100. That's the current rate. That's about $31 an hour. And you're doubling that, so that's about $12,000 over the course of the fall and the spring term. In addition, we encourage everyone who applies to our program, if you're eligible, to also apply to SSHRC, to the Canadian Tri-Agency Funder, because SSHRC offers quite generous funding, and we typically have a number of students who come into the program with SSHRC support. And as it says here, a small handful of our top admits will get tuition covered as well. Note also that there is some funding that's available from the faculty or the graduate school for attending conferences or travel grants for MA students. I'm going to say a bit more about that for PhD students, because the funding for conference travel and research travel is quite a bit more generous at the PhD level. Okay. So turning now to the PhD program, the PhD is conceived of as a 6-year degree. That's the standard sort of time frame that the graduate school gives to PhD students here at UBC, is 6 years. The coursework requirements are double what they are for the MA, so you're doing 12 courses. Note that if you do your MA here, so this is sort of a note to those thinking about applying for the MA, but also then thinking about a PhD, if you do the MA, you'll have done 6 courses for the MA, and then if you also get into and start the PhD program here, those 6 MA courses will transfer directly into the PhD. Our graduate courses here are combined MA PhD courses. They're really the courses that both the MA students and the PhD students take are PhD level courses. And so MA courses would count directly toward the PhD. You can also, if you've done your MA elsewhere, you can apply to have some of your coursework from the master's degree elsewhere counted toward the 12 courses toward the PhD. So you might or might not be doing the full 12 courses here at UBC. Okay, but you've got to get those 12 courses worth of credit. Then you need to take a comprehensive exam. That's it has a written and an oral component, and the idea behind that is to make sure that you have a good mastery of one of the field of political science that you plan to write your dissertation in. You will then go on to work on the dissertation, and the first step of that is to develop a proposal, which often called a dissertation prospectus. And you're going to be advised at that point by a supervisor and a committee of 3 plus 2 additional faculty members. So you'll have a committee of 3 faculty members who are going to advise you on developing your dissertation project and throughout the completion of that project. Once your proposal is approved, off you go to writing, to researching and then writing the dissertation. And again, the idea is that you have finished the dissertation and defended that dissertation within 6 years of your arrival here. Next slide. So this is again sort of graphically what that timeline looks like. So with the coursework generally in the first 2 years, right? Because it's 12 courses, 3 courses per semester is the typical load. You might be doing some teaching assistant TA work. You might be doing some research assistance for faculty members, working with them, doing paid research assistant work along the way. And then in year 3 is when you're taking those comprehensive exams and developing the dissertation prospectus. Years 4 to 5 are essentially your years for doing the dissertation research and starting your writing. You might at that point also be starting to submit parts of the dissertation as papers to journals to start getting your work out there and published. Maybe also presenting at conferences to get your work out there and get feedback on it and start networking in the broader, wider world of political science. And in year 6, you're finishing up the dissertation, starting to apply for jobs and postdocs, continuing to get your work out there at conferences and into publication. So funding at the PhD level, we offer funding of several different kinds. First of all PhD students on admission, so in your admission offer, you'll be given 5 years of funding that will include covering your tuition, so you will not pay tuition, plus a stipend to live on, so essentially fellowship money for you to support yourself while you're here for those first 5 years, plus TA employment. So you'll be guaranteed a certain amount of paid work as a teaching assistant, which of course is also sort of part of your, in some sense, part of your apprenticeship, part of your learning how to teach, right, as well as a source of income. There are generally going to be additional opportunities to TA or to be a research assistant beyond those that are guaranteed to you. We offer you a minimum guarantee, but in general, we tend to need a lot of teaching assistants. So paid work in the department is fairly plentiful. That includes in year 6 as you're finishing up. We also, again, encourage PhD students to apply for SSHRC funding. And we have quite a good success rate. Our students do quite well in SSHRC competitions. And that can, of course, result in having even more fellowship money to live on while you're here. The other thing one other area in which we fund our PhD students is supporting PhD students' activities, sort of professional activities. So this includes, as it says here, funding to attend conferences to present your work. And every year we have been funding somewhere around 10 to 12 PhD students to go and present their work at international conferences around the world. We fund dissertation research itself. So if your dissertation research requires going and doing field work, say in Latin America, we can help support that work financially. And we also offer funding to attend research methods institutes over the summer so that you can, in addition to the many sorts of qualitative and quantitative and experimental methods that we teach here in the department, you can go outside UBC to get additional methods training in the summer. Next slide. Okay.
So we're immensely proud of our graduate program and our grad students. I think we're able to attract really, really good students, and we try to help them do really good work, and that translates into a placement record afterwards that we're also really proud of, where both our MA students and our PhD students go afterwards. So we'll start by talking about where the PhD students go, and then talk about our MA placement as well. Next slide. So at the PhD level, we have PhD students who go on to do tenure track positions at major research universities in Canada, in the US, in the UK, in Australia, in continental Europe, and the list goes on. So people go and do academic research after the PhD and continue that kind of trajectory that they've started working on while they're here, and become colleagues, which is always a wonderful experience. And PhD students also go on into non-academic positions, changing the world in all sorts of ways. And we tend to ask them to come back and give guest lectures. They will go into government positions. In Canada, that might be the RCMP and Health Canada, Statistics Canada, First Nations Health Authority. They go to international organizations like the UN. They go to NGOs, and they work in the private sector. So we find that our PhD students go and do a huge range of really, really interesting things with their PhD. And it's really a joy to see them go on and move through the world like that, and then come back again to it when they can. Equally, at the MA level, we attract very competitive candidates, and they go on to do wonderful things. Many of them do go on to a PhD, so about 31% in the last few years. But certainly not all of them do. Some go into government or policy-related positions, into the NGO sector, into administration, international research positions, as you can see, law degrees, MBA as well. So there's a variety of ways that you can make your MA or your PhD from our political science department work for you in terms of the career path afterwards. And again, we're really proud of where we've placed our graduate students and where our graduate students have placed themselves, of course.
So I'm gonna, we're almost done actually with the sort of formal presentation, and we'll soon be turning to answering some of your questions. But I just wanted to finish by describing what the student experience here is like. And this is actually, I mean, I'm here talking to you today, but this actually doesn't come from me, but from our graduate students. We had the president of the Political Science Graduate Student Association write up a set of slides on the parts of his experience and his colleagues' experience that has meant a lot to them. So I'm just going to sort of talk you through that a little bit, just to give you a sense of the things basically beyond the classroom, beyond the exams and your own dissertation research that you could expect if you're here. So there's a quite vibrant intellectual community among graduate students, and the first item here is this annual graduate student conference. That's one sort of piece of it. The graduate students for many years have organized an annual event where they're presenting their own work right across the fields to each other, discussing that work, getting feedback on it. Faculty come in and serve as discussants, also giving comments on the work. This is sort of dissertation work that's still in progress. But this isn't just something that happens once a year. And just sort of moving down to the third item here. Each of the fields, so international relations, political theory, comparative US and Canadian politics, have regular workshops where graduate students and faculty in that field come together, usually over pizza, and at each session, someone presents a paper, a dissertation chapter, some work in progress. It's been circulated in advance, and everyone's read it. And then we have a conversation about the paper, the chapter, about in what ways it can be improved to make it a great paper that can be sent off to a journal, to make it a great chapter for the dissertation. So that's a key way in which we build both intellectual community, but also just sort of community, period, in a very sort of informal, low-pressure setting, and support each other in doing the best work that we can. There's also a whole range of professional workshops, training opportunities that happen across the university. So the graduate school itself runs a vast range of professional workshops, and everything from writing and overcoming writer's block to applying for jobs, to learning different kinds of data tools, of data analytic techniques, to dealing with stress. Just it runs the gamut. Huge amount of resources, and of course that's part of what a large research university like UBC can offer. That there's much more outside the department in addition to what's inside the department. Beyond the sort of internal community that graduate students are really a core part of. Sorry, I'm still on the previous slide. We regularly bring in outside speakers, and these are leading figures in the world of political science from around the world who are doing cutting-edge work. And we fly them in to present some of that cutting-edge work to us, usually while they're still working on it, before it's hit the journals or the bookshelves. And we always make time. So we go and hear the work. We ask them questions, grill them on on that work. And then we always make an opportunity specifically for graduate students to meet with these leading scholars. It's a chance to get to ask them more questions, a chance for them to get to know you and your work, develop relationships well beyond UBC. Yeah, next slide. I briefly mentioned the Political Science Graduate Student Association. So this is an organization that is what it sounds like. It's the graduate students in the department. It's their sort of representative body. They elect their own, I think it varies from year to year, whether it's a president or a prime minister, who represents graduate student interests on all kinds of departmental committees. And we have both PhD and MA student representation in department faculty meetings and on hiring committees. And basically, graduate students play a role in deliberating over and shaping the direction of the department throughout their time here. We also organize just, aside from the sort of intellectual and, high-level decision-making things that graduate students get involved in, we also make time for graduate students and faculty just to hang out together. And this starts with a barbecue at the beginning of September when the new graduate students arrive. It continues through a lunch in the fall, just a casual lunch that we provide for everyone, a holiday party in December, and so on, right through the year. Just to also provide kind of informal opportunities to get to know other graduate students, to get to know faculty, and to create sort of as open and supportive an environment, collegial environment as we can. There are a number of other points listed here that graduate students see as important to them, including the fact that teaching assistants have a union that represents their interest as employees of the university. There's a large international community. I mean, there's quite a large proportion of the students in the department are international students, but also more broadly at UBC. And then I think, graduate students just find Vancouver a really pleasant place to live. It's many of you may already know something about it. It's a beautiful city that offers, a great combination of the benefits of a city and the benefits of proximity to some of the most beautiful natural environments you're likely to see anywhere, the ocean, the mountains, and so on. And the campus itself is located right on sort of the point of a peninsula overlooking the water and the mountains. Okay, so I think we're gonna stop there with our presentation to you, and we want to hear what questions you have. We've got actually in the background here, Christopher Fernandez, our graduate program coordinator, who many of you may have emailed with already or even spoken to, and he has been taking in your questions and picking out questions for us to speak to. So we'll turn to those now, and Chris will sort of feed us the questions. So Chris, what have we got?
So we got a question from VB. Is a GRE a compulsory requirement for PhD admission? I have an MA degree from IDS, University of Sussex, UK.
So the simple answer is for a student in your for an applicant in your situation, so someone applying from outside of Canada, yes, the GRE is required. And it is also recommended, but not required, for applicants from Canadian institutions who say did their master's at a Canadian institution. It's still recommended, and it's also a good idea for MA applicants, though again not required. Just to sort of tell you why the GRE is important to the admissions process. So we realize that the GRE only tells us so much. It is a standardized test, and those have their limitations. But it provides valuable information because it is a standardized metric. And it is never the only thing we look at. But the thing about transcripts is that we can't always figure out what grades mean at institutions from around the world. We have a fairly good handle on that in Canada, which is why we don't require Canadian applicants from Canadian institutions. but our applicant pool is highly international, and the GRE just helps us to some extent to gauge, to sort of make comparisons, because we don't necessarily know what a B plus is at a university, say in the UK, right, or whatever, or what a 65 is, right, at different universities around the world. So it's not something to stress too much about, in the sense that it will never be the only thing we look at. We review all applications holistically, looking at transcripts, at letters of recommendation. For PhD students, you're submitting a writing sample, which we will read. We look at the whole package, but the GRE is certainly useful information. And if you are going to take it, the other thing that we recommend is that you do some preparation for it. The GRE is a test that you can actually learn how to take. And so you should try to find some practice tests, whether online or ordering a book of them, and give yourself a chance to practice the tests before you take it.
Okay. So this one is from Naveed. Is there a direct entry from the undergraduate to the PhD?
Yes, there is a direct entry from the undergraduate to the PhD. So you do not have to have a master's degree first to apply to the PhD. You can do it straight from undergraduate. I will say that it is relatively unusual for students to enter the PhD program without having done a master's degree. So we would be looking for direct entry. We would be looking for a really exceptional undergraduate record to seriously consider direct entry, just because we don't have quite as much information as we do for an applicant who has already done a master's, who's already done some graduate level work. But you are absolutely welcome to apply. And one thing that we do in some situations where we have direct entry applicants is we say, we think you're a promising candidate for the PhD, but what we'd first like to do is have you start with the master's degree. And if you'll recall, and then we'll see how you do in the master's degree, and then we can, review your record and consider you seriously for entry into the PhD. If you recall what I said a few minutes ago about the coursework for the MA and the PhD, they're the same coursework. And so for those of you considering applying direct entry, if what we come back to you with is, well, why don't you first start the master's degree? That's not all that different from starting the PhD, because you're immediately starting your PhD level courses, and all the courses you do in that first year will count toward the PhD. Anyway, if you are ultimately admitted to the PhD, it's just that we first want to see you perform in those courses before we guarantee you admission. So there's no time lost or work lost in that process. So again, yes, we absolutely welcome your application, but it'll be sort of a decision that we make in terms of whether to admit you first to the MA or immediately to the PhD, and it's something we could then talk about sort of at that point if you are admitted.
And this next question from Tazeen is for Katya. You mentioned that migration is one of the research areas in the department. Can you please tell me who is the leading professor in the field of migration at UBC, or if he or she may be open or is currently supervising any PhD students? And I guess a follow-up for that is a competitive GRE score for PhD applicants.
Okay. Thanks, Tazeen. So migration is a really interesting and actually a growing research cluster in the university as a whole. So there's an interdisciplinary cluster that is growing. And the person in the department who's been leading that and is very active in the department and in the cluster is Professor Antje Elleman. So if you look on the department website, you will find her contact information there. In terms of whether she is currently what her supervisory kind of capacity is and whether she's taking more students, I think it's generally not a bad idea to contact professors that you think are working in the kinds of areas that you're interested in and getting in touch with them, because you get to know the professors as well and you can start exchanging ideas about what you're working on. I would also very much recommend that you look through other members of the department. So there are also other professors who are working in migration-related areas, so refugees or international law. And do feel free to get in touch with us. We're always happy to discuss our research and always happy to talk about the possibilities of supervision that are there. In terms of a competitive GRE score, Alan, do you have anything to add on that?
So I think I'm going to demur on that question, just because it's, as I say, it's not like we have a minimum score that you have to meet on the GRE, right? We do look at these applications holistically, and so a weaker GRE score could be counterbalanced by really strong grades and really strong letters of reference and a good, really good, well-written writing sample. Like we've never on the admissions committee set a minimum for sort of what is a viable GRE score, and so it'd be misleading if I were to try to come up with one. I understand the reason for the question, but we really don't have one. Let me just also just point out that Chris has just entered into the chat thread the name of the professor that Katya mentioned under sort of leading the migration cluster at UBC, and that is Antje Ellerman. So you'll find her name there. And you can also go to migration.ubc.ca, which is the website for that migration cluster. Whereas Katya said there's tons of activity and several political scientists, several members of the UBC department, of the department faculty work on migration and are part of that cluster.
Okay, another one question from Irmac. Is it possible to apply for both the MA and PhD? And how does the department evaluate this kind of application? Does it create a negative impact for the applicant?
That's an interesting question. I'm not sure if we've had someone apply to both. Probably, so there'd be no negative impact. And I don't see, I mean, I think logistically, it's probably possible to go into the online application system and submit 2 applications. What I would recommend, if you're sort of thinking about both, and you don't have an MA yet, but you think you might be ready to jump straight into PhD, is just apply to the PhD. And then, as I was saying a few minutes ago, this then allows us to assess whether we think you're ready to go straight to the PhD or would be better off starting with the master's. And so we can sort you between those 2 tracks ourselves. But if you do want to be considered for the PhD, you really ought to apply to the PhD.
Okay, so this one is a more specific question from Ian Cheng that I thought it was interesting. I do not have a politics or political science background. I'm an international student, studied journalism in a foreign university, and only did 1 or 2 politics-related undergrad courses. I do have experience working in public organizations and eager to pursue an MA in political science. Do I stand a chance, and how can I increase my chance of being admitted? What kind of reference would help?
Right, great question. And I see we also had a question from another participant about what if your undergrad was in political science, but you have a master's in another field like communication studies. So generally speaking, it is not a requirement that you have a political science undergraduate degree to apply to either our MA or a PhD program. Political science itself is a pretty interdisciplinary discipline, as it were. It's a discipline that draws on psychology, sociology, economics, anthropology, history, philosophy, and so there are lots of sort of prior academic backgrounds that could serve as very useful preparation for political science graduate work. And we're aware of that, and we welcome applications from students who've done prior degrees in all kinds of areas. We will look to see if you've done at least some political science coursework. And a lot of what that's about is we want to make sure you know sort of what you're getting into, that you have a sense of what what political science is about, what are the kinds of questions we ask, what are some of the tools that we use to answer those questions. So having some political science, or I mean, in areas where political science and international relations, in parts of the world where political science and international relations are separate, seen as separate disciplines, so if you have some political science or some international relations coursework, that's certainly going to be helpful, and it could be at the graduate level, it could be the undergraduate level. But essentially, we take a pretty broad view of what counts as valid background, and what we're mostly looking for is people we want students who are capable, have strong analytical skills, who know something about how to do research, who are willing to work hard and have shown that they can perform well in an academic setting, and that doesn't require necessarily having a political science degree.
And I have a question here, and this is a little bit more of a student services related question for Maud. I'm dyslexic and now I'm in Montreal University and have some accommodations. Does it have that same kind of accommodation in UBC? Yeah.
So the short answer, same kind of accommodation, kind of depends, but the short answer is yes. So there is a Center for Accessibility at UBC that does help create an inclusive environment in which students can show their potential in their work. So as you come, that is a resource that is available, and that we do find works quite well.
Yeah, I mean, we see it as an absolute obligation on our part to provide accommodation where that's warranted. I mean, that is really part of the university's duty, is to create an environment in which every student can reach their potential. So in this, and the Center for Accessibility is an office that we work with regularly to make sure that we are providing these accommodations. So I would expect that, again, we don't, as Katya said, we don't know precisely what sorts of accommodations applicants might have at other universities, but we can certainly say that accommodation is sort of a core part of what we see our job as being.
Okay, so I have a question from Molly. Is it recommended to directly contact potential supervisors during the application process?
So it is certainly something that you can do to get a sense of whether this faculty member would be interested in the sort of work that you're interested in doing, whether it's work they'd be interested in supervising. It is not necessary to do it. You are asked on the application form who are some faculty members that you would be interested in working with, and so you'll indicate that, and we'll want to see that we can support you, right? That for the kind of work you're interested in, this is a department that can support you, and so we'll want to see sort of, are there faculty members who work, broadly speaking, in the area that you're interested in. That doesn't require you necessarily to have contacted those faculty members in advance, though. We will certainly for PhD applications, we will do that, make that connection in the sense that we will check in with faculty members in your area to see if they're interested. But you can do that. You can to find out for yourself whether UBC might be a good place for you. You could start a conversation. Write an email to a faculty member asking them. I would say a couple of things about that. One is to be focused in doing that. That is not to send emails, sort of generic emails to 10 faculty members, but to write to the 1 or 2 who seem to be most in your area, at least to start with. The other thing is that this is sort of finding that good match between incoming students and faculty members is more important at the PhD level than at the MA level. So at the MA level, we sort of take a broader view of the areas in which our faculty members are able to supervise. The thesis project is a much smaller project than a PhD dissertation. So we're not quite as concerned about finding sort of like one-to-one close matches between student interests and faculty interests. The last thing I'll say is that when you're at the point of applying to the PhD, and this is really sort of also advice about writing your statement, the statement of interest that would be part of your application. When you're at the point of applying for a PhD, the way we see it, you have a set of interests, and you've done some coursework and maybe even a undergraduate or MA thesis in that area, but you're really still at the beginning of developing your expertise, your skills, and your interests as a researcher. In your 1 or 2 years here of coursework, like before you start your thesis or your dissertation, you're going to learn a ton more about what the major debates are in the discipline, where the frontiers are, what we know, what we don't yet know, where you, with your research, can make a contribution. There are going to be issues and topics you might not know about right now that are going to suddenly spark your interest. All that is to say, we don't take these statements of interest as a promise on your part to work on some specific topic when you get here. What we want to get a sense of is, generally speaking, what are the sorts of issues that interest you? You don't have to outline for us a whole research design. I'm going to do X and Y and Z. Also, we're interested in seeing that you have a sense of, as I said a few minutes ago, like what political science is about, that you can write, briefly but clearly about a set of issues in political science that are of interest in you, that you, in doing so, can perhaps draw on a key literature in that respect, that you can sort of write and think in sophisticated ways about political science sorts of questions. That's kind of, we're getting a bit more insight into sort of how you think, right, from that statement than we are trying to figure out exactly what your thesis or dissertation will be about.
Yeah, and I also want to let everybody know that some of you have posted very specific case questions. So we might not have enough time to cover that in the Q&A. So please send me an email. I'll type my email address below. And please send me your email inquiries. And then if it's like a very specific case and you want me to take a look at your transcripts and your undergraduate transcripts and your master's transcripts, just feel free to email me at christopher.fernandez@ubc.ca.
And that's, of course, also on our website, Chris's website. Chris's contact information is under About or Contact on the department website. Okay.
Yeah, I think you've touched base a little bit on the statement of research interest, but I think I'll try to consolidate the question here from Julia and Tazeen.
Sure.
And they're more curious about what specific thing you're looking for in your statement of intent, and what is the scope of research agenda for that statement of purpose, and especially if you have one or more than 2 fields of interest.
I mean, that's totally fine. You don't need to. It's not particularly important to us that someone coming into the program knows what they want to do, right? As I said a moment ago, your interests are likely to evolve in various ways, and you could have 2 or 3 areas that have really, over the course of your undergraduate work, your master's work, that have really caught your interest, and they may be quite different from each other. That's totally fine. You can talk about all, both of them or all 3 of them. I mean, you've got a certain amount of space to work with there, but that's not a problem. We're not looking at for you to pin yourself down at this point.
Okay, and I have a very interesting question here from Daniel. Out of the 12 necessary modules, out of the total 21, is it possible to avoid statistics modules?
I will speak to that. So I don't know whether Daniel is interested in the MA or the PhD, but the answer is different for both of those. So first of all, the 12 makes me think he's interested in the PhD. So, but to start there, so it is 12, not 21 courses for the PhD. So you'll do generally speaking, 4 semesters of coursework with three courses per semester for the PhD. Again, you might be getting credit for some of those from prior graduate work. So for students in political theory, okay, students who are interested in political theory, political philosophy, there is no requirement to take statistics. But for and for students in international relations, so this my answer varies a bit by field, right? The different fields have different requirements. For students in international relations, there is strong encouragement to take both statistics and qualitative methods. For students in comparative politics, Canadian politics, and US politics, you are required to take both a set of statistics courses. There are it's a sequence of 2 courses, and a qualitative methods course. And just to say a bit about why we have these requirements or strong encouragements to take statistics, quantitative analysis has, over the last 20 to 30 years, become really central to the empirical study of political science. And for those of you who haven't done it, I encourage you to open up any of the sort of highest impact political science journals, like the American Political Science Review, American Journal of Political Science, Journal of Politics, International Organization, World Politics, Canadian Journal of Political Science, European, any of these, and take notice of the kinds of methods that the articles there are using. And I think you'll see that a majority of them actually are using quantitative methods of some kind. And we see it as critical to our mission to train our students to be able to go out into the world of political science with an ability to understand, and if they want to use a wide range of methods, certainly the methods that are most central to the discipline. So that includes qualitative methods, but it also includes quantitative methods. And this will, we find that this equips our students both to be able to do excellent academic research, and, Katya was talking about the different sorts of jobs that our students get afterwards. It also equips our students very well to take on non-academic positions. One of the most sought after skill sets out there in the world beyond academia is the ability to analyze data. And so these quantitative skills that we are imparting are, in some sense, some of the most portable skills that we can teach you. MA students we do not have any methods requirements for MA students. But again, for all the same reasons, we certainly like to see our MA students taking methods courses. It's totally up to the student. And we regularly have lots of MA students in both the quantitative methods courses and the qualitative methods courses that we offer. But that's more individual, more of an individual choice.
Yeah, and I guess an addition of that question from Gary is like, to what extent does the department encourage students to adopt qualitative methods, especially for comparative politics?
So I might jump in that partly just to echo what Alan was saying. Part of the approach is to give students the tools to answer the really interesting questions in ways that are appropriate for the question. So part of this is having the tools, and then there's also, and this is where the students will also have highlighted the kind of interactions that you have with your supervisor. There is an ongoing conversation with supervisors about, all right, here are the questions that you're interested in, the questions that you might become interested in, and here are the kinds of methods that make sense to be used. And that may be qualitative, it may be quantitative, it may be a mixed method. What we'd like to have to enable you to do is to say, here's a really interesting question that I want to find an answer for. And you do not have to say, well, I can't find the answer because I do not have this skill set. Instead, you can say, here's a really interesting question, and I think I know how I would answer this particular question. And it may, again, be qual, it may be quant, it may be heuristic or interpretive. Or it may be some combination thereof.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. So again, if you look at the faculty web pages on our website and look at the kinds of work faculty do, you'll find that many of us do qualitative research, and we offer actually 2 graduate courses in qualitative methods. So there's one that focuses on process tracing and comparative methods, and there's one that focuses on interpretive methods and critical theory. But I think that one way to put what Katya and I have been saying is that one thing that really distinguishes this department from a lot of political science departments is the methodological diversity and breadth of the faculty, and in turn the students and the courses that we offer. There are many departments out there that are overwhelmingly quantitative in terms of what the faculty do, right? And where you won't find a course in qualitative methods. There are many departments out there that are predominantly qualitative, and where they might offer one course maybe in quantitative methods. This is a department that strikes a terrific balance between the two, where we've got lots of people who do qualitative work, lots of people who do quantitative work, and that gives us the ability to offer a wide range of methodological courses that you can take, and also to, for you to have supervisors or a committee that brings together, a whole range of methodological expertise. Like a frequent thing would be to have, I'm thinking here at the PhD level, for instance, on these 3-person supervisory committees, to have, say, 2 faculty members who do quantitative work and can advise on that aspect of the dissertation, and one who does qualitative and can advise on that aspect, or the other way around. And that's something that we can offer because this is a department that's very methodologically pluralistic.
Okay, so I think we have time for 1 or 2 questions, but I think I'll jump into this administrative question from Shalal. Could you please inform us about the closing date for the fall 2020 program, along with the time period, and how long it would take for UBC to get back to us in terms of the results? So in this slide that we'll be sending out also to all the participants, there is also a frequently asked questions slide. And part of that slide here that I'm taking you in is going to show you the usually in terms of the deadlines for PhD programs, our deadline for this year is December 15, 2019, and for the master's program is January 7, and the offers so this should be updated to admissions are are usually around February 2020.
Yeah. So actually, let's take the slide down. Let's move off of this slide because it has some incorrect. It's not updated.
Yeah.
So so just to underline what Chris said, the PhD deadline is different from the MA deadline. Okay. So the PhD application deadline is December 15th. Okay. And that's roughly in line with most PhD deadlines in the United States, for those of you who are also applying to US schools. It's a little earlier than some of the other Canadian PhD programs. Our master's deadline is January 7th. Is it the 7th?
The 7th.
It is actually the 7th, yeah. And what this allows, we do it this way just because we adjudicate the PhD applications first. So we want to have those first, and we, as Chris said, get those offer letters out sometime in February, and then the MA offer letters will come out, will be sent out usually sometime in March.
Okay, still have, I guess that will be it. Questions, or do you want 1 more question?
Let's take 1 more. We've got another minute. Yeah.
So this one from Aftonville. My research interests include international security and more precisely international terrorism and counterterrorism and intelligence studies. Can you recommend a faculty member specializing in that expertise?
So really, I think you might want to think about sort of the angle from which you want to approach this. So there are various people in international relations who work in international security, you might think about whether, so Arjun Chowdhury works in terms of the international state system. Richard Price would be working from the angle of norms in international relations. If you're thinking about how we have approached, or how the international system has approached anti-terrorism through international organizations, whether regional or global, that would be in my wheelhouse. Professor Michael Byers deals with international law. So there are various of us who can help you work through that kind of an interest, or work with that kind of an interest in really interesting kind of ways of what exactly it is that you want to know about how anti-terrorism and counterterrorism is evolving in the current international system.
Okay, so I think that's all the time that we have.
And we will get to questions that weren't answered via email. Is that right? Chris will
Yes,
follow up?
yeah. So
Okay.
the specific questions that you've posted that I haven't had time, I'll try to answer that via email. And also, if you have any additional questions for me, again, this slide here would show my email address at christopher.fernandez@ubc.ca. And again, as a reminder, our deadlines again for the PhD program is December 15th, and then for the master's program is going to be for January 7th. So yeah, and we would highly recommend that you start the application process as early as possible. And yeah, and best of luck in your application.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Yes, this is it was great to get a chance to talk with you and answer some of your questions, and we look forward to seeing applications from most or all of you. Okay.
All the
Bye-bye.
very best. Bye-bye.